before we get into that, we have some news. James, speaking of those Warriors, can they win the title? Andrew Wiggins has come back to the Golden State Warriors. He was away from the team, we learned, because his father had a serious medical issue. We don't know what the medical issue is. We have no reason to believe we will ever know, or we should have no expectation that we should know. How big of a deal is this? He hasn't played in ages, but I'm assuming you think it's somewhat of a deal.
Yeah, I think he's really an important part of a Warriors team that is somewhat lacking in depth in the first place. So, I feel like Wiggins is a little bit of a controversial player insofar as different people have different estimations of his on-court impact, and the numbers give it kind of a mixed picture and stuff. But there's no denying that, certainly he's a starting caliber player, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's a big deal. The real story, without going too deep into it about all this though, is how nasty the rumor mill can be, because there was all this speculation that his wife was cheating on him with his friend and all this weird stuff came out. Turns out his dad is sick. That blows, dude. You got a sick dad, and then you pop up in the internet and you read that your wife is banging your friend. That sucks. People need to be a little more careful with this stuff.
People just need to be better. I mean, the fact of the matter is, he should never have had to say what the issue was ever, but
Yeah.
basically he has to because, like, people are out there just wildly speculating all sorts of things, and those speculations become facts for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
it's fucked up. Social media is ruining the world. So I mean, maybe not, but no, yes, yes, yes.
In some ways, yeah.
Above the
Yeah.
Break supports social media ruining the world. Okay,
Yeah.
we are
Social media is ruining the world. Follow us on Twitter, etc.
YouTube. We don't have a Facebook because
Well, boomers.
I don't use Facebook. All
Yeah.
right, let's get to some less happy news, or I don't know if that news was even happy with Wiggins, considering everything around it. But this is
Basketball wise, happy, but
yes,
yeah.
happy basketball news. Okay, Naz Reid for the Minnesota Timberwolves is out indefinitely with a fractured wrist. The Timberwolves have been playing much better. They look like they're going to make the play-in for certain, and they just got Karl Anthony Towns back. He's looked pretty good. He's had, I think, one clunker, but for the most part, he's been who we know he is, a very, very talented offensive big. But Naz Reid been playing very well next to Rudy Gobert without Cat, and in limited minutes, there were some interesting moments where they kind of went the triple towers route. I don't know how much of a Naz Reid fan you are, James, but he's a good player and he's had a good season, and I believe he's a free agent. So this kind of sucks for the
At this
Timberwolves.
very moment, Naz Reid is starting for my Rockets 2023-24 2K build. I'm a really big Naz Reid fan, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So do you think he's going to be a Rocket next season?
I have my hopes. He's a guy I would love to target. I think he's a borderline starting caliber player. He's a combo big. He gives you a lot of versatility, spaces the floor a little bit, solid rim protector, which is a couple inches taller. I think he'd be effectively Miles Turner with just a little more height.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's really good. He's a hardworking, bit of a lunch pail guy. But I guess this injury, I'm not really sure on the precise nature of the timeline insofar as whether it's likely to affect his free agency or what's the deal with that?
I mean, if it's a fractured wrist, here's the thing, I'll say this. If you're an athlete, it's almost better to break a bone unless it's obviously you don't want a serious injury, but breaking a bone is nice because your timeline to return is much more understandable, and there's no all right, the ankle feels good. Now let's see what happens when we ramp it up. How does
Right.
that ligament feel? So for him, it's probably better and just that he'll he'll do whatever rehab he needs to work on the muscles that have atrophied minimally, and then he'll be fine. It's not okay, when I go 100%, the ankle fucking hurts. Can I, there's none of that guesswork. It's it's
It's either
healing.
broken or it's not, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Nasri's having a good season. A one box plus minus. It's gotten better every season of his career. Positive on offense, positive on defense. Two
He's
way
good, man.
player.
He's solid.
He's good. I mean, I I thought the Timberwolves were going to be a lot better this year, and they finally started putting their shit together. Hey, you're rubbing your hands together like
I
you were
knew it.
right. It's like they missed their best player, like almost
It
the
didn't
vast
work when they
majority of the.
had their whole roster, man.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm just out here gonna say this. Like they missed their best player for most of the season. Um, Anthony Edwards, when him and Karl Anthony Towns were sharing the court in the first part, was out of shape. So by the time Cat gets hurt, is the time Ant's getting in shape, and then I was like, I'm not saying I was right about being like expecting him to be good in the regular season. I'm just saying I don't know if I was wrong, and there's no way anyone can convince me that like
Fair
I
enough.
was for
Fair enough.
sure being crazy. So Naz Reid, get better, get the bag. And if you're, listening to this podcast, James wants you to check out the Rockets. Because you can never have too many 6'9" to 6'10" guys that can shoot a little under league average from 3-point range. Jabari Smith Jr.
Yes,
He's
that's
fine.
my
He's
type.
fine. He's fine. He's good. Okay. This one is close to home, but not really because James doesn't live in that portion of Canada. But Nick Nurse, championship winning coach of the Toronto Raptors, his tenure in Canada, in Toronto, could be coming to a close. I think there's some Rockets, Raptors fans who are looking for this. I'm one of those
Yeah.
people that go, Nick Nurse is a really good coach. This roster like isn't that good. Their bench is horrible. They have no shooting. Their like best on-ball creator is Pascal Siakam, who I think is very good at that. But if you don't surround them with spacing and shooting, it's kind of going to be a clusterfuck on offense. He's not that good of an isolation creator where you're like, we don't even need spacing. So I think Nick, like I would not be in the business of getting rid of Nick Nurse unless I had to. So this is kind of a surprise to me. What are your feelings on this?
Well, I have a lot of feelings about this because, first of all, I'm sure you've seen that Nurse is by now heavily linked to the Rockets, like the
Yes.
very serious legs on that rumor. And so I want it very much. I very much want it.
Yes. That'd be a great hire
Uh,
for them.
yeah, be a great hire for them. A great hire for anybody because he is a great coach, right? I, I I am mostly I agree with you that I'm like I don't think the Raptors should just fire Nick Nurse, right? I don't think they should, but I think that and like I talked to a lot of Raptors fans, as you know, being a Canadian, and the reviews are pretty mixed. Like Andrew is gonna jump off the ledge if they fire Nurse. On John is gonna throw a party. Like there's like I think of all my boys, and they have pretty mixed opinions. But I think the ones that are down on him would say that he overworks his players and he's got too short of a leash and he kills confidence and like he's a little too hard ass. He's kind of like the new Thibodeau. And he really is the new Thibodeau. He's a defensive mastermind who's too hard on his players, but at the same time, he's a defensive mastermind, and being too hard on your players is probably better than being too soft on your players.
Yes,
So,
as the
yeah,
Rockets can attest.
exactly. Yeah.
you
So,
know,
anyway, yeah, I wouldn't fire him. Long and short, though, I would not do it.
yeah, the whole like, oh, like when you're like, hey, he runs his players into the ground. Go look at like that Raptors bench. Go look what happens when those guys are out there. Like if he doesn't do that, your record's way worse, right? Like the Raptors like net rating and like underlying metrics suggest they've like been pretty unlucky this season. So, I would be in the business of saying like let's keep him unless there's always this and like I think this is possible to play a coach that's like kind of viewed as a hard ass. I think there's like a shelf life for that for players, and they just need like a new message, a new voice. And if that's like all it is, where there's like, look, like, and maybe Nurse is the one that's kind of driving that bus. He's like, look, like this message just isn't hitting the same way that it used to.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then like maybe it is the right decision. But I would not be celebrating losing a coach of Nick Nurse's quality because, I mean, what coach is available that's better realistically?
Well, no, none. Apparently they're interested in Udoka, who I think is probably a pretty good coach if you're willing to overlook the escapades, you know.
I mean, yeah,
But
but
is he
Udoka,
better than Nurse? I can't say that. No.
yeah, and like Udoka has one season where his team was awesome, but like that team was awesome. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, like could and also he had two coach of the year candidates as assistants. So like there's more questions to me, like Will Hardy and Joe Mazzulla, right? Like those guys were
Oh yeah.
both
Yeah.
assistants on staff. So it's like Udoka I think is a good coach, but like How good? I'm still not sure because it's one season and we didn't get to see him without two lead assistants that have proven to be excellent NBA head coaches.
Fair
So
points. Definitely fair points. Yeah. Let me, before we move on from that, say a couple of things. And I think they're both kind of related in a way. A lot of times, like these are a couple of chicken and egg discussions that we're having here, right? For example, firstly, does running players into the ground, is that even necessarily a problem? Like, look at Jimmy Butler. He was with Thibodeau on the Bulls. He played him like 39 minutes a game, had him guarding the other team's best player, trying to initiate some offense, like huge workload for years, right? And his longevity's been sensational, you know? By contrast, Kawhi Leonard, I think, has mostly only had player-friendly coaches, and he's hurt all the time. Like probably it's the nature of a guy's body is a more determining factor of their injury proneness than is like their career workload. You know what I mean? I would think LeBron James went to the finals every year for like a decade, right? Didn't miss games in the playoffs. He's fine. It's just like a guy's body is going to matter more than the wear and tear, I think, at the end of the day, right?
yeah,
And
yeah. I
and then a similar chicken egg dilemma is this. Like at the end of the day, man, I could coach Team USA to a win over the Rockets. You know what I mean? Like I just go out and play. So like coaching is a tricky thing where it's like guys get credit sometimes for doing very little, and then guys get blamed for stuff they couldn't really control. I'm not saying coaching doesn't make a difference; it absolutely does, but I think it's secondary to roster and talent. You know?
yeah, just like if you have a guy that you can be like, go cook, you got some points. Like it's just,
Exactly right.
it's
Yeah,
like if you have a bunch of like, marginal NBA players, you're gonna have to concoct the best offense to have a worse offense than the guy who's just like, here's the rock. Just make sure
exactly.
he has it.
So okay, now we're ranting on this one, but one more thing I want to say about that, right?
Yeah.
Steven Silas, obviously on the hot seat, pretty much like fired. He's essentially fired, right?
He's just his contract's not gonna be renewed, which is
That's right. So yeah, so he's done, right? I
yeah.
forget that. So when people defend him, sometimes I hear like, well, this guy was the mastermind behind the elite Mavericks offense in I guess 2019-20 or 2020-21, like
It might have even been before that.
2019-20,
Yeah. I think it was before 20. I think it was 18-19.
2018-19. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, either way, it's like, was he really a mastermind? Because that team pretty much played basketball the way I play 2K. It's just like give the ball to Luca, pick and spread, and let Luca. Like I don't think I can't really attribute that to coaching so much, you know?
Yeah. Look, this let's get off this, but I have one
Yeah,
thing to say. Just the
yeah,
Silas stuff, it's like, look, like if you think he's a bad coach, shut the fuck up because like you have no idea. He's only basically coached rosters that were designed to suck.
yeah,
And then if you think he's, been unfairly criticized, I'm like, well, like let's also be real. Like the offense doesn't optically look good, and with this type of talent, you would ideally want to run a different offense to see if you can get more points. So like both sides are right. Like he's like
yeah.
probably it's like here's the thing, he's probably a league average head coach, and if you give him a good roster, he's going to look good. If you give him a garbage roster, he's going to look bad. But like, even if you have a great coach, maybe the best head coach of all time, you can still be the Spurs who have like a worse net rating than the fucking Rockets. So like,
Exactly.
let's not get it twisted. The guys you have out there are pretty fucking important. Matter of fact, I might say they're more important than anything because David Blatt, who's never got another NBA head coaching job, made it to the finals, lost to those Warriors teams who are incredible, and then was the one seed in the East when he got fired for Tyronn Lue. And Tyronn Lue wins, a championship where LeBron goes God mode coming back from a 3-1 deficit. And he's supposed to be a genius. It's like he just had the best player in the goddamn world. Like I'm not saying I think Tyronn Lue's a great coach, but like the way we talk about coaches is like, oh, Phil Jackson's great. He only coached the best player in the NBA for like, he won 9
Always.
championships in an 11-year period or a 13 or a 12-year period. He only had the best player in the league 9 of those 12 seasons. Like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, yeah, no. Let's move on.
All right. This one we're not going to belabor because it gets to something I want to talk about later. Wizards are in contract extension talks with Kristaps Porzingis. James, do you think this is a good move? And don't do the like the Wizards should be trying to tank because yes, obviously they should be trying to tank. They should be trading everyone, but because they're clearly not going to do that, is this a good move?
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's a line of thought that I actually take a lot in my articles. I'll be like, this team, I mean it's often the Wizards. This team should be trying to they should rebuild and tank. But since it's apparent that they're not going to do that, here's a trade they could make. And like, yeah, I mean, and there's some merit. There's some merit in just trying to put forth the best team you can, right? Like, and
Yeah.
Porzingis, I mean, he's still young enough, and as we're gonna get into, he's quite good. So sure, extend him.
Look, this is the other thing is that people that want him to tank, he's got a player option for next season. If he opts into that and you add 2 or 3 years to that, all you're doing if he stays healthy before you end up deciding to blow it all up is you're just increasing the trade value of that
Yeah,
asset. So like fundamentally, I think it's a good decision, even if you think they should blow it up, because it just means when you trade him, you'll probably get back more stuff because you'll be under contract.
yeah.
And that's important. So it's I like it. I like it. Porzingis. Okay. Finally, before we get to the fun stuff, there's a new collective bargaining agreement tentatively. There's a bunch of stuff in it. I put down some of the highlights of it, and I probably missed some. So the draft stays the same in terms of, I believe, the lottery odds, and also they're not letting guys come straight out of high school, which I don't understand, but fine. You still have to, whatever. Veteran extensions. This is a big one. Can now be 140% of their previous deal was only 120%. This is relevant to players like Jaylen Brown, Domantas Sabonis, and a guy like DeJounte Murray, where they signed contracts that weren't max rookie skill extensions, and they've become kind of max caliber players. But teams have to basically wait for them to either get all NBA to give them a super max extension, and if they don't get that, because getting all NBA is tough, they could only extend them for 120% of their previous deal, which would make no sense for them financially. So it allows teams to extend more guys that probably deserve a bunch of money, but it was going to be difficult. They're going to almost always hit free agency. And then this one I thought was kind of weird is that they're suggesting that to be qualified for end of the season awards, major ones, you'd have to hit 165 games played to be eligible. I
65.
Yeah, my bad. 65 games, 165 games. No one's the MVP.
Nobody's eligible.
No one's getting the MVP. Yeah, so 65 games. I don't like that. Because they're probably gonna put like I heard Bobby Marks, ESPN say they're probably gonna put some caveats where it's like, well, this game he missed counts because the team wanted him to do it, and so it seems to me to be a whole bunch of a big bad can of worms. I just say this: I would just explicitly put in for the awards because the league can do this to tell the media, be like, you should take games played into account more so than other stuff. I believe I sent you, if you just did it by VORP, which is box plus minus, but basically with your minutes total in there. If you just did the All NBA by VORP, the All NBA team would make a lot of fucking sense, and it would make a ton of sense when they do it next because they'll be positionless. So like, I just would say, hey, use VORP. Like, take into account how many minutes guys played. But if he plays 50 games and he's the best player in the league, he should make at least third team All NBA because he'll probably be top 15 in VORP. That's any comments on the CBA?
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the game's requirement. Like the specific 65 criteria feels a little arbitrary. So like if a guy played 64 games and another guy played 66 games, the 64 game guy, he's way better, but what, he can't be all NBA compared to the guy that played 66 games? Like that's pretty dumb. Right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. The thing about players coming out of high school is something I'm really interested in. Because before I would have agreed with you that I really believe strongly that players should be allowed to come out of high school, right? I never saw a big problem with it. I don't think the bust percentage on high school players was like staggeringly high, which I find is often the argument. It's like, well, these guys aren't even ready. It's like, well, you got Kobe Bryant and Kevin Garnett, and then you got Jonathan Bender and Darius Miles. Like it kind of seems to go both ways, right? But I do think it's kind of interesting how these pro-am leagues are cropping up. Like, well, you got the G League Ignite program, and now you've got the Overtime Elite. And so I'm a little interested in seeing how that goes. Like guys who are ready to play professional basketball straight out of high school going to these places instead of going to the NBA could just make for like kind of an interesting broader basketball landscape. So I'm not entirely opposed to that aspect. Like I would have been even just like a year ago. I would have been like, hell yeah, that's stupid.
yeah. Well, my big thing with that is just like, look, it was clear teams were taking guys out of high school it with picks that they shouldn't have been doing it, right? Like it, but like there are still guys, and there's fewer of them than I think we're getting selected when guys could come out of high school that were like ready to like contribute in some capacity at the NBA level right out of high school. But for me, it's just like, look, like just be smarter about your drafting. It's like this guy's a massive project. We shouldn't use a top 5 pick on him, even if he's got a tremendous talent. We should wait. If he falls to 10, cool. Maybe that's a good pick there. Or if like you have the infrastructure to do it. But for me, it's just like, look, why are we preventing guys that can do this at that age from doing it? You're basically like, there's no reason not to. If a guy can contribute at 18, just let him contribute at 18. And if you're upset that you're bad at drafting and developing, that's your own fucking fault, right? Like the owners tend to do these things where they're like, well, we need to put stipulations in here because we're bad at our jobs. And it's just like, what? Like you're protecting yourself from yourself at the, you know, and it's hurting the players. And they're like, yeah, that's fine, right? And it's like, I mean, I guess, like, but like, it just seems irrelevant, right? Like, especially now with all these G League teams, like, draft a guy and stash him in the G League for a season. Like, you have him in your program, like, you have way more data on him. And like, I think it, to me, it's just all about the veteran players not liking that 18-year-olds come in here and get $10 million a season because they're like the third overall pick and they ain't doing shit. But
Yeah, no, I do think that's a thing, and that does annoy me as well. This whole mentality, it's a ball don't stop argument, right? Of like old players are getting squeezed out of the league. It's all these young players. It's like these teams are smart enough to just roster the players that they should roster. Like that's generally how it goes. Like
yeah,
if a guy's out of the league, it's because he probably shouldn't be in the league. It's just kind of how it is. Um, and there is no real good, solid, logical argument, in my opinion, against like why can't an 18-year-old be in the NBA? Why can't a 17-year-old be in the NBA if they're ready? And
exactly.
ultimately, yeah, and ultimately, what is really the difference insofar as like, okay, so say there's a guy that would have got drafted out of high school, but since he can't, he goes to college, and then he drops the ball in college, sucks in college, doesn't make the league. It's like, well, that kid could have at least gotten one NBA contract out of it, right? So it's not to protect the players. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree. I just like the Ignite and the Overtime Elite. So
no,
like, so to that extent, I'm pretty okay with how
no,
basketball looks that way.
I agree with you 100%. I wish there was more kind of like, you know, tertiary basketball leagues that like were relevant. Like, you know, because I like European soccer. Like I hate the closed system of the NBA where it's like you can never not be an NBA team and we're not letting anyone else become an NBA team. Like, and I hate that. I like the idea of like there's a pyramid, you can like play your way into it if like you have a great system and like you do all this stuff. And so I agree with you in that regard. I'm just like, because that doesn't exist, I'm just like, what the fuck are we doing? Just like let like it's here's the thing. Very few guys would be coming out of high school, but the reality is high school players today are better than they were 20 years ago when we were letting them come out of high school anyways. So it's just like what I don't get this. It feels like they're trying to protect the NCAA and the G League, which is just like protecting the G League. Who cares? That's a developmental thing. And you could put those players in there anyways, and they'd be very famous. It'd be like, we have a 7th overall pick playing in the G League for a season cooking. Like people might want to actually go see that. Like he might end up becoming a great player. I don't know. They just here's the thing. Those guys aren't part of the Players Association, so they just don't give a fuck about them. And
Yeah.
I think like that's what it comes down to.